Over my years of gaming, I've always gravitated towards sniping, so when I played the Wardogs closed alpha, it was no surprise that I ended up spending a lot of my time with the sniper rifles, and my experience with them ultimately changed pretty drastically over the course of the test. Initially, I felt that sniping was very clunky and underwhelming, enough so that I was genuinely questioning whether or not I was even going to buy the game. However, once I unlocked the Mosin, and without dramatically changing how I played, the role suddenly became much more enjoyable and much more effective. So my main issue was less with sniping itself, and more with how underwhelming that initial experience with the Scout was. The Scout overall just felt significantly weaker than later options. Once I unlocked the Mosin, I basically had no reason to ever go back to it. Even the SKS felt superior to not just use, but also to go against. Some of the criticisms I've seen in relation to this problem is that, well, it's the starting rifle, it should be worse. I'm not saying that I'm not fine with that being worse. What I am saying is I don't understand why the starting weapon needs to feel so bad. It can be cheaper, less specialized, have worse handling, that sort of thing to give me more of a reason to eventually upgrade, but it should still give me a good enough introduction to the role that I actually want to keep playing it. In my case, the Scout was so underwhelming that I genuinely considered not even buying Wardogs at all because I didn't know whether the rifle was the problem or it was just simply what sniping in the game felt like. Like I said though, once I unlocked the Mosin, my opinion changed almost immediately. Now when it came to the progression side of things, part of the issue here was just me trying to learn the game. Initially I didn't realize how important the binoculars actually were for earning XP and cash. Once I started consistently spotting players and vehicles, leveling became noticeably easier, and I actually like that Wardogs does reward you for contributing in other ways than just getting kills. Granted, I also had a less frustrating time sitting there spotting with the binoculars than I actually did using the Scout rifle. It worked, but I also wouldn't exactly call it exciting either. And even after I had figured out some of the importance of spotting, I was genuinely somewhere around the middle of the pack in the servers in terms of cash earned while I was using the Scout. However, once I unlocked the Mosin, that substantially changed. I didn't personally substantially change how I played the game though, but I was regularly getting much closer to the top of the matches in overall cash earned. Clearly, I was also learning the game a lot more throughout the test, so I can't say that every bit of this improvement came from just changing the rifle. But the difference was immediate enough that the weapon itself seemed to make a pretty significant impact. So to me, the progression felt less like unlocking different viable options and more like finally getting access to something that was worth my time. Now earlier I mentioned the clunkiness here, and one of the issues I'm discussing is weapon sway. At close and medium ranges, it's not nearly as noticeable, but at further distances I often felt like I was fighting my scope more than the player I was trying to shoot. The ADS speed is already relatively slow, so having that constant movement made fine adjustment pretty clunky feeling. And I do want to clarify something here, as I've had multiple people tell me that steady aim worked for them during the alpha. I could never get it to be noticeable on my end, so either something wasn't functioning properly for me, I was missing something about the mechanic and how it worked, or the effect was so subtle that people were interpreting it differently. And personally, I'm not sure which one of the three that it is, so this is something I will specifically test again during the beta, and this time I'll record it so I can actually compare what's happening. Now, I also mentioned this in the previous video as well, and that the economy here can create an interesting incentive. From what I've seen, kills receive bonuses based on distance when you're using a sniper rifle, and those bonuses can give you a pretty substantial amount of cash. That even applies if you're sitting outside of the control zone. I'm perfectly fine here with difficult long-range shots being rewarded more, but my concern is that the reward, when it becomes large enough, that the most profitable way now to play as a sniper is to deliberately move further away from your squad and further away from the control zone. Wardogs has clearly put a lot of emphasis on teamwork, but the economy can potentially reward snipers for separating themselves from that teamwork. And I'm not saying that this necessarily means the distance bonuses need to disappear. I'm not sure what the fix would be here, maybe lowering them. But at the same time, there is a benefit for a sniper to be off on their own, especially if they're able to spot and put a lot of pressure on the enemy zone while still helping their team and squad. Overall, I actually ended up enjoying sniping a bit in Wardogs. The Mosin especially changed my opinion of that role quite a bit. The biggest problem was that the starting experience didn't really represent what sniping actually became for me. The scout felt bad enough that I questioned whether I would enjoy sniping at all, and the progression felt more like escaping that weapon than simply unlocking another option. And there's definitely still some things that I want to understand a little better, especially towards the weapon sway, weapon information, progression, balance, that sort of thing. But the important part here is that once I got past that first rifle, sniping actually became fairly entertaining. But if you played the alpha, what did you think of sniping? And did your opinion change once you unlocked the later rifles? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. I'll catch you on the next one. RAMTEID out.